And we're live. Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of our Senior Fireside Chats. Today we're joined by, would you like to introduce yourself?
My name is Bruce Karney. I'm 68 and I live in Mountain View, California.
Awesome, welcome Bruce. So today's topic is going to be surrounding the environment and sort of what people my age or our age can do. So we'll dive straight into the first question. Bruce, could you sort of give a brief introduction of who you are and your background working with the environment?
Sure, I'd be happy to do that, June. When the movie An Inconvenient Truth came out in 2006, my wife and I were in a preview audience. We hadn't really heard anything about the movie, and we were really stunned by it and just really devastated by the realization of how the climate was deteriorating due to human activity. And we both became interested in changing our careers to help in this struggle. So the first thing that I did was to work with a group of people in my hometown, Mountain View, to try to negotiate a discount on solar panels for their homes. We found a company called Solar City that agreed that if we could bring 40 households together, they'd give us all a 30% discount. I organized events, and we actually got 119 households to buy at the same time. And that led to me being hired by Solar City to lead similar programs. I didn't really have a background in solar energy. I didn't have a background in sales, but it was a need that I saw that I could do something about. I also led 2 citywide task forces in Mountain View about 10 years apart, bringing together residents to suggest solutions that the city should employ to reduce greenhouse gases, not only from city operations, but also what individual residents in Mountain View can do. As a result of all this work, I have some insights as to what people of any age, but particularly young people, can do to try to influence local government to be more sustainable. But you could use these same techniques to try to influence local government to do anything that you would like it to do. They're generalizable approaches that I don't think are taught in high school, and really most people don't know. So that's what I'd like to talk about today.
Yeah, awesome. And that ties beautifully into our second question, which is a lot of people my age are interested in what they can do to help at a legislative level. Yeah, so could you give some advice on how we could do this effectively?
Yeah, let me just sort of talk about the levels of government that exist. So everyone's familiar with Congress and the presidency at the federal level, and almost everyone's familiar with the state level, where we have 40 senators in California and 80 assembly members who meet in Sacramento. But fewer people are familiar with what happens at the local city level. City councils typically have either 5 or 7 members. And when you think about what you would need to do to influence policy, think about if you could just get 3 of the 5 or 4 of the 7 to be in favor of your idea. That's a majority. That's enough to make your city's policies change. Whereas in Sacramento, you'd need at least 21 senators and 41 representatives. So, which of these tasks is easier, and which of these tasks is not influenced by big business and big money? It's basically at the local city level, where you may, in fact, through your high school, know a lot of people who you could get to come to an event. When city councils meet in person, that means going to a city council meeting. Now that we're in the world of Zoom council meetings, it's actually easier for young people to attend. You're probably Zooming all day, so this is just one more appointment to make. And so the story I'd like to tell about how to influence the city council, I'm going to use the analogy of dinner. And so let's suppose that you have 2 foods that you really don't care for. You don't like beets, and you don't like tomatoes or anything made from tomatoes. And in one part of the story, imagine that your mom tells you it's 15 minutes to dinner, and you say, okay, and then you show up at the dinner table 15 minutes later, and there's a salad that has beets and cucumbers and feta cheese in it, and the main course is lasagna, which has got lots of tomato sauce in it. And at that point you say, what's up with this? I don't like this. I'm not going to eat it. And your mom says, too late. I worked hard to make it. You're going to eat it or you're not going to have any dinner. And at that point, you need to decide, well, which of those two paths are you going to go down? But imagine that when she told you dinner was in 15 minutes, you'd said, what's for dinner? And at that point, she told you what was for dinner. And you said, well, gee, I don't like beets and I don't like tomatoes, but could you make a salad where it's just the cucumbers and the feta cheese, make mine without any beets? And she might at that point say yes. Now let's roll things back. And let's suppose that on the day before she went to do her shopping for the week, you asked if she had planned what dinner was going to be for the nights coming up. And she said, yeah, okay, well, on Monday we're going to have chicken, on Tuesday we're going to have tacos, and on Wednesday we're going to have beet salad and lasagna. And at that point, before she had gone shopping, if you had raised your objections, it would be much easier for her to adjust. Now, she might not have given in to your every demand, but at least you'd know what it was you were concerned about. So the moral of this little story is that if you are going to a city council meeting to try to influence them, and what's on the agenda for that night is the final decision, just be aware that there was probably a long period leading up to that decision where menus were planned, recipes or ingredients were purchased. There might have even been polling of other members of your family to see what they would like to eat. And because you weren't involved in that process early enough, your objections have little weight. In fact, a long-term city councilman in Mountain View once told me, I have never changed my vote because of something I heard from the public on the very day the vote was being taken. But he has changed his opinion based on input that he gathered over time. So just to wrap this up, how would a teenager create the ability to influence a city council member ahead of time? And that's going to be a scary thing for most teenagers, but this is how you do it. You pick a city council member, maybe one that your family knows, maybe one who represents the district that you live in, because many cities have district-based council representation. And you phone them up or you email them and say, I'd like to spend 15 minutes talking to you on the phone to tell you either what I care about, maybe it's an environmental issue about biking to school or whatever, or just to get to know you a little better and for you to get to know me, because I'll guarantee you that most council members, unless they have teenage children themselves, don't interact with teens very often. And so through this conversation, rather than just yelling at the council member and telling them what you think about whatever's your hot button issue, you get to understand what they think. So a good framing question is, Council Member Jones, I'm very concerned about greenhouse gases. What are your thoughts about that, and what solutions are you currently advocating for? And if they're not advocating for the solutions you think are good ones, you can say, well, have you thought about this idea or that idea? And you may find out that they have thought about it, but they consider it to be politically infeasible at this moment. And that's where you just sort of say, okay, we're planning for the future. This isn't a one-time conversation. This is the beginning of a relationship between me as a constituent and the council member. And if you can do this as a member of a group, like a high school green team or environmental club, so much the better. But even if it's just you, that conversation can have real ramifications. I'll close on this question, June, with just one specific example. The former mayor of Mountain View, Margaret Abekoga, has 2 teenage daughters. And a few years ago, I would have said that Mayor Abekoga was not the biggest environmentalist on the council, but apparently her daughters told her that they were very concerned that the earth would not be inhabitable, that's a bit of a stretch, or at least as conducive to human life by the time they were in their 40s and 50s, and that the only way to preserve the environment was for local governments to take action. And because their mom was the mayor, she had a lot of influence. And just imagine if every council member throughout your audience's listening territory could have conversations with teenagers about issues of concern. It could make a real difference.
Wow. I mean, that right there, that whole answer was chock full of useful information. So I liked how you mentioned, first of all, how you can't act last minute and expect everything to change. How you have to, start early, even though that may be difficult. And I also greatly agree with what you said about how when you phone up your representative, you can't just start screaming at them and tell them what you want. I think that a big issue of today is we're having difficulty sort of understanding perhaps each political opponents or each other, and that can lead to argumentation and no progress. So I really appreciate your statement about how you have to work to sort of understand your representative's point of view and work from there. So thank you very much for that. And is there any closing remarks you would like to say to our viewers? Any farewells?
Well, I'm just really energized, and I think most people my age are, when we see the passion and the commitment that young people have to the causes they believe in. Particularly with respect to the environment. I think the Sunrise Movement and Extinction Rebellion are organizations that make sense for young people to get involved in, but there are also organizations that appeal to all ages. I highly respect the League of Women Voters, which is not just for women, it's also for men. And in the area where you and I live, in Santa Clara County, the 5 different leagues of women voters are geographically, they cover different parts of the county, and most of them offer very, very inexpensive membership to people under the age of 21 or 25. And again, networking, getting to know people who know the right people is an important thing for young people to do to amplify their influence. And so joining the League of Women Voters would be a good thing to do. Or organizations like the Sierra Club, who fight very hard for the environment and have activities of all sorts, not just political activities. So those are my closing remarks.
Real quick, it's interesting you mentioned the League of Women Voters, because they actually came into our economics class and they gave a presentation on voting resources and the importance of voting. So I thought that was pretty interesting. So
there's, it's also true in California that if you're 16 or over, you can pre-register to vote. And what that means is you get your name and contact information into a database, and then when you turn 18, or maybe shortly before, I can't remember the details, they touch base with you, make sure you're still in the same place, and then your voter registration becomes active with no muss, no fuss. And when you're 18, you may be off to college somewhere outside of the area, but you can register in your home city. Again, this is a California approach. I don't know if other states have it, but please take advantage of that if you're 16 or over, to be pre-registered.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. So to all our viewers, I hope you greatly enjoyed this information-packed episode. And that's it for me for today. And thank you, Bruce, once again for joining us. Bye-bye, viewers. Thank you.